Hi everyone, welcome to Cambridge Photography Week on Demand. And we're talking to a number of local photographers about their projects, about their stories, and their share and their advice as well. So I'm absolutely delighted to have Ruth with us today, and we are talking about landscapes without limits. How you doing, Ruth?
Fine, I'm fine. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, thanks for joining. So it's just a really nice opportunity just to kind of have chats with local photographers. It's fascinating when we love chatting with photographers, obviously in the shop, but also at the Cambridge Photography Show, which is on Saturday the 7th of October. So if anyone hasn't got their ticket yet, feel free to get one. Its general admissions are free, and also got loads of talks, free talks going on, and paid workshops. But I'll stop the promo there, Ruth, and let's get on with the chat.
Okay.
So tell us a bit about yourself, Ruth.
Okay, well, I started taking landscape photos too long ago to even mention, but I will quickly mention it, probably about 35, 40 years ago. And really, how it happened is I saw somebody taking photos. I was living in London, I lived in Greenwich, and I
Okay,
thought,
yeah.
well, let's have a go. I'm going to have a go at this. And in those days, there were lots of shops like yours, lots of independent shops, not great, big, huge places that they are now. And I
Mm,
bought a Nikon FE2
okay,
film camera. And
nice.
I had a little flat, council flat actually, in Greenwich, and I taught myself how to develop negatives and how to print black and white in the toilet, actually. There was a nice blacked out
Brilliant.
toilet. People did wonder what was going on. That's how I got into photography. Then work basically got in its way. And over the last 10 years, I've gone back to landscape photography seriously, which has always been my passion.
Mm,
One of the things that's interesting to me in terms of taking landscapes is that you not only can end up with some wonderful photos, but you always end up with a really exciting experience outside in the landscape, wherever that may be. Because
mm,
9 times out of 10, of course, you are outside in a landscape, experiencing the fresh air, the rain, the snow, the sun, the wind, whatever. And however really the shoot goes, you end up feeling a lot better about yourself at the end of the day, even if the
mm,
stuff that you get back on the screen hasn't always done what you wanted it to.
mm. Well, that's a good point, actually. It's there's various ways of just getting out of kind of the day to day and just having a bit of headspace. And
Yeah.
obviously photography is a great way of doing that. So and I like what you say, actually, even if when you come back you're not quite happy with what's on the screen, you still get the benefit of having been out and about.
I think for me, landscape photography has to be about you want to be in the landscape. If you don't
Mm,
like being in the landscape, if you don't enjoy being out there and putting up with all that it has to throw at you, then don't do it. Go and
mm,
do studio work, go and do macro work, go and do things that you can set up in your house. All of those things are perfectly valid. They're just not something that, if you like, inspires me like landscape photography. I
mm,
think the difficulty with landscape photography is that so many perceive it as a very male pursuit,
mm,
and so many perceive it as a very young men's pursuit, which means trolling up mountains and hanging on with pieces of wire and putting
yes,
yourself,
yeah.
which, I feel very strongly about. It should not be like that. I
Mm,
think you have to have a broad view of what landscape photography is. And that broad view means that the person who is 85 and an excellent photographer may not be able to get to the top of a Scottish mountain, but they may be able to represent, for instance, parts of Cambridgeshire's fen, parts of Cambridge itself, in terms of
mm,
its meadows, in the most beautiful ways. And I think those ways are just as valid. What I really say to clients that I work with is, they say to me, how tough is it going to be? And what I say is, well, I work with you to meet your needs. So if you can't walk that far in areas of the particular landscape, then I'll make it so that you still benefit and you still learn.
That's good.
I think for me, that is critical, and I think it's being moved away from. And I think the magazines and certainly Instagram. I mean, Instagram has got people at the top of mountains all the time. In fact, I think it's a bit tedious, but it's what sells. And if you're in business, you want to sell, don't you?
Well, that is a thing. Unfortunately, the algorithm and what their algorithm on Instagram decides is, what is popular and what gets the most extreme reactions, and that can definitely be applied to the world of photography as well as politics and all of that, all those kind of things. It's
Absolutely. I mean, the
yeah,
reels, some of the the sort of 15-second reels of landscapers in the most amazing, and they are. I'm not going to say these places are not amazing, but they
mm,
are only for some people.
mm,
And the other thing that you have to understand about reels is that, you can make a reel even if you weren't really there. I mean, the world of AI has now opened up a complete can of worms or
mm,
a complete treasure trove. It depends how you view it.
yeah,
And so people making out that they're at the top of some wonderful mountain in Peru, standing on a precipice, might be that they're just sitting in their computers, sitting in a computer room with their computer.
yeah, you're right. It's and you just detach yourself from it, don't you? I think detach yourself if you use that technology too much, rather than using it to help enhance. And I like what you say about goes back to the kind of accessibility thing. It's I was talking to Bill from the shop who were down in the mill pond because he's doing a workshop, wildlife workshop. And he's saying, we've got all this stuff near us.
Yeah,
It's not that far away, and
that's right.
landscapes are so accessible, much more accessible. So,
That's right.
and if that makes people, go out and do what they do more, what they enjoy doing, as in
Yeah.
photography, they're
And
reducing the barriers to entry. It's great.
And I think that point you have made about reducing the barriers to entry, that's really, really well put, actually, is absolutely essential, because we don't just want it to be for a particular set of people. Now,
Mm,
we want to have a broad brush approach. And I think some of the best landscape photographers, and I mean the famous landscape photographers, had that broad brush approach as well. When you
mm,
look at their work, you can see that they worked in a whole variety of landscapes and using a whole variety of genres.
yeah, lovely. What's your if you're talking to somebody, you touched on some of this already, but if you're chatting to somebody, say it could be a client, or you're chatting to anybody who's a photographer, and they're either doing landscape photography or want to get into it, but either way, are not doing enough of it because they do feel there are those barriers to entry. What would be your advice to them?
Well, the first thing that I say to anybody who's really interested in landscape photography, and this is a very basic question, but it's a really important one, is how well do you know your camera? And they look
Mm,
at me, because actually you do need to know the equipment that you're using, particularly out in the landscape, because
mm,
the landscape influences what you do with your equipment and how you use it. So that's the first question.
true.
And the second question is, where do you live and where are your local landscapes? And
Mm,
that local landscape just might be, a little group of trees somewhere. But if they're within 5 to 10 minutes drive or 15 to 20 minutes walking, then the first thing I say to them is move out there once a week, twice a week, three times a week. Have a look at the conditions that you're shooting in: early morning, rainy day, late at night, and see what photographs you can make from your immediate landscape.
mm,
That's the first thing that I say to people. And
nice.
what that then does is that they then have the confidence to go out into their landscape, work with their equipment well, badly, come back and reflect, improve their techniques, and keep going back. I mean, one of the things that I do, even when I live in Norfolk, okay, and I spend a lot of time in Scotland. I mean, it couldn't be further away, could it really, from Norfolk?
Yeah.
But I go back to the same locations a lot. And even here, when we were all locked down during those COVID years, there's a little place, in fact, it's one of the photos you've got today, called Pies Mill in Loddon, which is a 10-minute walk from here. And I shoot that again and again and again in different conditions, because it is local and I've really got to know it well. So that's the first thing that I would say to people who are thinking about landscape photography. The third thing I would say to them is, don't buy a great big bag full of very, very heavy lenses that you don't really know how to use. Work with one or two lenses to start with, usually like a mid-zoom 24-70, something like that.
I mean, good idea. It's like we do, in the shop. The guys in the shop are, making sure that the person who walks in is getting what they need rather than what we prefer to sell them. It's
And
two
I
very
think
different things.
it is, I mean, how many people really need 100 to 600 millimeter lens? Only very, very particular photographers. They might want to play with one, but they're probably not going to use it that much, and it's not practical. I mean, we've now got, of course, the era of mirrorless, and I've got two systems. I've got DLSR still, a Nikon 850, and a Fuji H2. And I say to people, why have you got two systems? And I say, one, because I'm lucky, I can afford it. But secondly, I can't carry all of that Nikon gear for any length of time. So therefore, let's have a second system, which is lighter, and it makes where I'm going a lot easier. Makes places a lot more accessible when you're not dragging 10 to 12 kilos on your back. So think about what you've got as well in terms of equipment. And sometimes I just say to myself, I'm just going to take one lens and work with that lens, because it makes you work in the landscape very differently. You actually have to move your feet a lot more. And if you've got a prime lens, you move your feet even more with a prime lens, because basically you have to form that composition.
Yeah, lovely. But it's kind of, I suppose in its ways, removing the technical barriers to it as well.
Yeah.
Don't let the tech interrupt it too much. Keep it simple, and you can always build on that, can't you? As you get into your rhythm. I like what you say about going back to the same location as well, because you get to see progress. But also, of course, every environment is different, even if it's the same place.
And we know that the landscapes we work within are changing. They're changing for all sorts of reasons. One, to do with what we are doing to the landscape as people. But secondly, we've also now got the influence of climate, which has changed things quite dramatically. I remember about 9 or 10 years ago being in the Campkins in Scotland, and a local farmer was wondering why I was taking pictures of ice. This was completely beyond him. And they were just sort of intimate landscape shots. And he said, well, it's -11 here at the moment, but most years are -21, which is quite astonishing. This was about 8 or 9 years ago. And Scotland's, in the last 2 or 3 years, haven't seen those temperatures at all. That's completely changed. Gone are those days of the -20s, even the -12s, 13s have gone. So that of course influences, what you do and how you do it. There's a lot more rain, unfortunately.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And all the becoming less random summers as well. Heat waves in the summer. So in September. My
it's
goodness
nearly
me.
October and it's like 22 today or something.
Yeah.
I know,
Goodness.
it's quite remarkable.
Okay, so you've already mentioned some of your shots, so I thought I'd get them up on the screen and let's have a chat with them, chat about it. So, which one's this then? Tell us a bit about this.
Right. Well, all of the shots I selected for you today are also selected in terms of anyone could take them. So this first one, quite literally, is in the car from me, 15 minutes. It's a place called Reedham, near Reedham Ferry. And
Okay.
we unusually last winter had a hoarfrost. I mean, this frost was really intense for the lights of Norfolk. I mean, it could have been somewhere, deep in the north of England. And we had these beautiful pale blues in the sky. And I just got actually the Fuji H2, so it was a great time to experiment and to see what this camera did. And what I wanted to do here was to pick out a very sort of particular part of the landscape, emphasising the patterns of the branches with the hoarfrost on them. And then you can see that the tree is overhanging, the Norfolk reeds, which, in this part of Norfolk go on and on for miles. So it was a shot literally where the car was a few minutes away and I was just standing by the river, and the tree was there and the reeds were there and the light in the background was superb, and I had a new camera to play with, so it was great to play with shots like this and create this, I suppose some would say it's a bit of an abstract landscape. I call it sort of looking within the landscape and concentrating on particular elements of it. So very close to home.
I like that actually what you say, because it's often its vastness that I think comes to mind when thinking about landscapes. But this is like, as you say, within, which is really, really lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, so let's go on to the next one.
Okay, this one I also chose because this is Somerleyton, and lots of people go to Somerleyton, which is it's in Suffolk, but it's really on the Suffolk and Norfolk border, and they go to shoot the windmill. The windmill that's now only got 2 sails left, and it's a beautiful spot. But at Somerleyton, there are little bits of woodland like this. They're not vast. And again, you can drive up, park your car, walk about the woodland. It doesn't involve any degree of danger in any way whatsoever. It's just a beautiful small woodland. But what happened is that I knew that the day had been pretty misty. And I thought by 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, it would have cleared, but it didn't. So I drove to Somerleyton, and what I really liked about this particular scene was the birch trees were sort of glowing in the mist, and there were just hints of autumn. You can just see hints of yellow and orange on the leaves and the trees. And then you have the bracken, which is of course pretty damp and wet from the fog, and just a hint of green to break the photo up. And I just sort of looked through this tunnel of trees, and I shoot quite a lot of vertical landscape shots, particularly in woodland, and I just handheld this. Usually I'm a tripod girl. I'm always using a tripod, but I handheld this just because I happened to sort of turn around and see this scene, and shot it with a 70 to 300 lens on the Fuji H2. But a really simple shot that for me is one of my favourite photos.
That's lovely. I like the subtleness of the the yellow in the leaves, and then say the bracken, and then you got the green in the middle. It's lovely balance of colour, I think, definitely.
Thank you.
And then, yes, our last one. Tell us a bit about this.
Now, the reason I put this in is because I was in Yorkshire, and it had been raining for a very, very long time, days. And what I decided to do was, well, I'm wet anyway, and there's a waterfall called Horddraw Force, and it's a tourist spot. People go to this spot, but they tend not to go in the rain, and they tend not to go in December or January. And so I just took the walk to the fall. Now, the shot I've taken has just focused on a particular part, and what I wanted to do here was really look at the rocks and the force of the fall, because there had been so much rain, just cascading around and off and bouncing off the rocks. And there's also a branch behind the fall as well. And this was a tripod shot taken with a neutral density filter. But again, there was the only difficulty involved in this shot was just making sure that the neutral density filter didn't get a lot of rain on it. And I just basically held a cover over the top of it while this was probably something like about 17 seconds with the neutral density. But again, this would be considered quite a tourist trap, and people in the summer go, obviously, and picnic and whatever. But again, it's a landscape that's local to some. And, I could have done a whole variety of compositions at this force. I just wanted that sort of abstractness to it. I didn't want the whole force in it. I wanted us to concentrate on the rocks and the cascading of the water around that. And the other thing about shooting in the rain is that when you've got rock formations like this, they take on a sheen. So this is a colour photo, but in fact, it could be a black and white photo, but it isn't. It's a colour photo. And it's very popular. It's in terms of prints, this one sells quite a lot. And I had an exhibition recently in Norwich, and this sold, which was surprising because I thought a less abstract shot would have been one of the first to sell. That's
lovely. I kind of, there's a bit, if I saw a Lord of the Rings character in there, it wouldn't be surprising. It's a lot of kind of Tolkien-esque in terms of
and that's
it's lovely.
The beauty of a dark rainy day in Yorkshire, go to the waterfalls, you've got this overcast light which is perfect to work with.
And I love the shine as well. It's like it's really nice, really nice. Well, thank you. Really appreciate your time, Ruth. It's been good to chat. And it's always nice to kind of dive into people's shots as well and find out a bit more about them. But I really appreciate it. And we might see you at the Cambridge Photography Show. If not, you know where we are. We're in King's Parade in Cambridge. But we do have anyone who hasn't got their ticket for the Cambridge Photography Show, then it's on the Saturday, the 7th of October at Downing Street, Hilton in central Cambridge. We also have a series of midweek events during Cambridge Photography, which starts on Monday, the 2nd of October. So, thanks very much, Ruth, and have a good rest of the day.
Okay, thank you very much.